Welcome to the second episode of Lift Heavy, Run Fast. I'm your host and coach, Hybrid Coach Mike, and today we're going to be discussing how to structure your hybrid training week. And there are a lot of ways to do it, but I'm going to give you a rundown. Some of the methods I use, some of the methods other people use, and you got to see what works for you and just play around with a few different strategies here that I give you. Side note: this morning I actually had a little tempo time trial run. So the way I structure my training week is I'll do, as of right now in my off season, and I'll go into that a little bit more in a second, is I do three running sessions a week and three lifting sessions. Today was my faster run. I had to do a 5K tempo and I did it at about 4 minutes and 3 seconds pace. I did that on the treadmill. Treadmill, by the way, for anyone that needs to run at particular paces, when you've got pace targets, whether it be an interval session or a tempo session, treadmill is usually the best way to go because it keeps you honest and makes sure you're running the pace that you're supposed to. If you can get comfortable running on a treadmill, it's probably the most accurate way to train, to be honest. So I'm doing 3 lifting sessions, 3 running sessions a week. Today was a 5K tempo run. I ran at 4 minutes, 3 seconds. Not a PB for the 5K. I think my best 5K is about 3 minutes 50, which I did in a race. It's on Strava if anyone wants to verify me. I don't have it on me right now, but it was something like 19 minutes, something seconds. I don't remember, but it was about 350 pace. I think 1918, 1908, I forgot. So that's my best 5K. Today was not a PB, but I was on holiday a little while ago, didn't really run much. Before I went on holiday, I wasn't focusing a whole lot on running because I had just come off a race and I was just pivoting my efforts towards lifting, which is, again, pivoting your efforts towards one modality or the other isn't something you necessarily need to do, but at some points you will need to do it, particularly if you have a competition that you're training for or you're trying to get better at one in particular. That's another episode that I am going to unpack a little bit more, but I was focusing a little bit more on the lifting side of things, so my running did take a little bit of a toll, and then going overseas, I didn't really run a whole lot or lift a whole lot either. Since coming back, I've done a 3-day split, 3 and 3 split, 3 running sessions, 3 lifting sessions. So usually with my clients and myself, a 50-50 split is normally the best way to go if you're happy to progress quite slowly. For me right now, I'm happy to progress both my lifting and running quite slowly, and due to the absence of competitions, I have no competitions coming up. I haven't booked any in for the end of the year. I may do a half marathon at the end of the year. I'm definitely half marathon fit. I ran a half marathon last Saturday or Sunday in training. Felt fine. I can definitely do one. I don't know if I'll get a PB right now, but if I do decide to do that race, I may up my runs to 4 days a week, which is normally what I do when I have a race coming up. I find with the level I'm at right now, when you're in that intermediate to advanced stage, you probably need to do a minimum of 3 runs a week. The more advanced you get, the better you get. You need to probably focus a little bit more on running more. And then when it comes to lifting, it's actually interesting because you should not necessarily lift more days of the week if you are more advanced. Some of the best lifters in the world only lift 3 days a week. Just because the amount of work and volume they do in one session is quite high, they actually need total rest. Whereas running, you can get away with training a lot more because the smaller runs you do in between or the easier runs you do in between those hard sessions can be great at improving recovery, and they can also help you improve your work capacity. And when it comes to running, work capacity is a big thing. So basically your ability to handle more work. The more work you do, in theory, the more work you will be able to handle. However, you can't just go from running none to running 10 sessions a week. You need to build your way up to it. And often you may not actually need that much in order to improve. So that'll kind of bring me on to my next thing. If you're happy to progress slowly, like I am right now, I'm doing a 50-50 split, it's fine. And the thing you find is, like, I'm still progressing actually right now with both my running and lifting, albeit slow. For many beginner to intermediate athletes, which is the majority of the people that I train, no one really like world class in both running and lifting. I have a couple world class lifters. I have a couple very good runners. I wouldn't say world class Olympic level runners, but I do have some world record lifters. When it comes to being at that level, when it comes to being at that level, progress is probably going to be slow anyway. So you're not going to get those quick gains week on week like you would if you're a beginner to intermediate. If you do want to progress those faster, doing more work may be the way to go, although it's not always going to be the answer. For me, doing 3 runs a week, for example, I have run a sub, I have run a 40-minute 10K and a sub 20-minute 5K, running 3 days a week, doing about 40 to 50 kilometers a week. I've also lifting 3 days a week, deadlifted 300, benched 152 kilos and squatted 235 kilos, lifting 3 days a week. You can do more, but sometimes it also depends on where you're putting that energy. Are you just doing more for the sake of doing more? And is it actually adding any more to what your improvements need to be? When it comes to your training, all you need to do when it comes to your training sessions is give yourself enough of a stimulus in order to improve. Sometimes that stimulus, particularly in the beginning, it's not very much. You actually don't need a lot to improve in the beginning to intermediate level stages. Primarily what you need is weeks of consistency. When you get to the more advanced and stuff stages, consistency doesn't cut it anymore. You actually then need to have those really hard sessions to push the needle that little bit further. Because those sessions in between are more so just maintaining what you're able to do, but then you'll have that hard session which may be able to push that needle a little bit further. Push that needle a little bit further. Push that needle a little bit further. But in the beginning, most of the benefits are just coming from weeks of consistency because your body is adapting to this new stimulus. It's a new stimulus for you, obviously, sometimes running for weeks in a row. But for someone that's been doing it for years, running maybe even 100 to 150 kilometers a week isn't that much. But what does push the needle a little bit further is maybe this really crazy hard session that they might be able to do once or twice a week at most. So therefore, in those situations, the more advanced you are, the slower the improvements are going to be. But anyway, that's not the point of this video. The point I'm trying to get across now is that quality matters more. So the quality of the sessions are what you should be focusing on in the beginning and even in the later stages of your training. Quality matters more than volume. Volume is a great predictor of your overall level of improvement and level, but if the volume is junk volume, both in running and lifting, if you're doing exercises for the fuck of it, but they're not actually contributing to your overall goal, it's junk volume, and if anything, it's just inhibiting your recovery capacity. And you recover and improve outside of your training sessions, not during them, right? The other thing is that fatigue accumulates way faster than adaptations do. So if you're throwing in heaps of volume and heaps of junk for no reason, it's not necessarily going to be benefiting you. So you need to be smart about what you need, and sometimes it's actually not that much. So in my case, running 40 to 50 Ks a week right now, I think is sufficient. But if I want to crack a PB, I know that I'm probably going to need to push the running a little bit more if I want to get it done within the next couple months. If I'm willing to wait 6 months, I might be able to hit a PB within the next 3 or 4 or 5 months time. But because I may have a race coming out at the end of the year, I think I may need to add an extra run. But if I'm only lifting 3 days a week is normally fine. And generally you'll find with the bigger lifters, like the really big dudes or the really bigger or the larger girls, you're not going to need to lift 4 or 5 days a week because you're not going to recover in time for that next session because you're doing so much work each session that you actually may need to train that little bit less. When you're bench pressing 200 kilos, it may not feel like it, but you're super cooked compared to someone that's only benching 60. So you need that extra day or two of recovery. Anyway, how to structure your training week. Segueing from talking absolute shit off topic to now segueing into how to structure your training week. What you need is what you need, not what your favorite lifter needs or not what your Olympian level athlete that you aspire to be needs. You do not need that. What you need is just enough to push the needle that little bit more. So if it's just 30 kilometers a week or 10 kilometers a week you need to run in order to push the needle that little bit more, just do that. And how you structure that throughout your week will depend on what you have time for, lifestyle, job, how many days a week can you train, all that kind of stuff. So at a minimum, I reckon, if you are brand new to, I'm going to give some very blanket general rules here, and they don't apply to you, but you can apply them to you is what I'm saying. If you are a new runner, fresh runner, running once a week normally is enough to improve. After a couple of weeks or months, you may feel like you really reached the limit with that one run a week. You need to up it to 2. After maybe a year or so, you kind of feel like you've hit your capacity of running and you still want to get better at running. Now you're doing 2 big runs in a week and you find you're really cooked. Maybe you want to add a 3rd run. So now you can distribute your volume a little bit more into that 3rd session. And then again, as you get better and better, like me, if I do a race at the end of the year, if I want to do 60 Ks a week, I'm not doing 3 runs. There's no way. One 25K run, 115 and 115 or something, or whatever it is. That'll leave me smashed, right? So I might add an extra run so that the volume or fatigue is a little bit more spread out throughout the week in that case. And then now if we talk about lifting, if you're new to the gym, you could probably go to the gym once a week and see improvements. You go to the gym eventually twice a week, you'll see improvements. 3 times a week, whatever. The difference is, though, I will say, with strength training, more is not always better. So doing 100 sets doesn't actually really get you much more benefit if the quality diminishes. There's kind of like a an inverted U where it's like doing more gets you better and then doing more actually doesn't get you better and just increases your injury risk. The same does apply for running, but if you stick with it long enough and you're consistent enough, doing more might actually get you better, which is why you see some of the elite runners in the world will do up to 200 kilometers a week in some cases. But when it comes to lifting, I don't know anywhere where doing 100 set workouts 6 days a week is going to benefit you. You're going to destroy yourself. So don't go and do that. So what works for you? 50-50 split is always good. Two running days a week, 2 gym days a week, 3, whatever you can kind of work around. 3 lifting days is what a lot of my guys do right now, and 2 running days a week, which is plenty for most of them. What I tell a lot of them is if they want to add another running day in a week, I can add that in if they have a race coming up. But for many of them, that's sufficient. Then the 3 gym days a week are quite manageable. And then, so that's one. If you find you're trying to get better at one thing over the other, it's important sometimes to maybe do that more. So if you're really trying to push your running a little bit more and you're really strong and really good at lifting, you may need to add in an extra running day. At the same time, if you've only been running your whole life, but now you want to get into powerlifting, maybe you want to pull back on your running a little bit and strengthen a little bit more by getting an extra day or 2 in the gym, because it'll allow you to do that little bit more repetition throughout the week. The other thing you can look at is, what are you enjoying more? You don't need to do something just because the internet tells you to do it. If you enjoy running more than lifting, run more. And if you enjoy lifting more than running, lift more. Do whatever you want. I assume most of you that are listening to this are doing hybrid training because you enjoy running and lifting anyway, or want to improve at running and lifting anyway. But if you have a preference, one over the other, and you're not trying to be like a world-class lifter and a world-class runner at the same time, or a world-class hybrid champion at whatever sport that is, Hyrox, CrossFit, I don't know, whatever you want to do whatever you want in the gym. Just make sure you're trying to do a little bit to improve each week, or each month, or each training cycle. Just a little bit of improvement is enough. And in some instances, you will not be able to improve. Sometimes if I am pushing my runs really hard, if I have a race, it's unrealistic of me to then think I'm going to be able to hit a PB in the gym. And the same thing, if I have a really big lifting competition coming up, one of my athletes has a powerlifting competition coming up, of course I'm not going to be like, hey, why aren't your runs getting better? It doesn't make sense. Sometimes you need to prioritize one over the other, depending on what you have on. So look at your lifestyle, look at what you enjoy. If you have competitions coming up, that's one thing. If you don't, that's totally fine as well. Just look at what you have and what you enjoy, and then try to work out what is manageable for me and what am I able to consistently do each week. If it's 2 gym sessions a week and 2 running sessions a week, awesome. If it's 3 gym sessions and 1 running session a week, awesome. If it's 3 runs and 2 gym sessions, whatever it is, work it out and figure out what works for you, and then just try to build on that each week. Try to do a little bit more each session, each block, or whatever. There's no rules to this, is what I'm trying to say. The one thing I will say though, fatigue management, I'm going to talk about this a lot, is going to be something that you may need to consider, particularly as you get better at both of these things, lifting and running. So structuring your week in such a way that works for you is one thing, but also structuring your week in such a way that your runs and lifts don't, in succession, put you into the ground. If you do a really hard run on a Monday, you probably don't want to have a really heavy squat session on the Tuesday. So maybe you want to move that really hard squat session to a Thursday and have the really hard run on the Monday. Sometimes the structure of your training week can be a little bit important, just to ensure you can maintain that quality, which I mentioned before, in each of your training sessions. I'm going to be releasing some programs at some point over the next 2 weeks that you can then go ahead and download if you want guidance on how to structure your running and lifting programs, or have me do it for you. If you want me to coach you, there's online coaching spots available. All you got to do is reach out to me on Insta or via my website, and I'll contact you and we'll kind of do the rest from there. But anyway, I'm not trying to sell you anything right now. The point is, if you're unsure, the options are there. And also there's plenty of other people on the internet that will help you. However, just be careful. Some of the influencers want you doing 3 sessions a day. And if you're a beginner, you don't need to do 3 sessions a day. So don't go and believe everything you see on the internet. The purpose of this podcast is just to try to give you information that you can then apply to where you are right now. Getting through all the weeds and bushes, navigating the environment that is out there, to give you information that you can then hopefully apply to where you are right now, regardless of your skill level. That's my aim. I hope I do that. If I don't, tell me, please. I want to make sure I fix it. Anyway, I think I've covered everything. Structuring your training week, do it however you feel like it, but find what works for you, and then try to make sure that you can continuously progress that each week. If you find you're not able to continuously progress it each week, each training block or whatever, then think of different ways to structure your week, or maybe you need to add in an extra run, or maybe you need to add in a little bit more of an extra squat session somewhere so you can practice it a little bit more if that's what you're trying to get better at. Think of, what are my goals right now? What am I trying to get better at? What are my priorities? If I'm trying to get better at the bench press, I should bench press and make sure I then base the rest of my training week around that. I'm trying to get better at the squat. I need to do my squat sessions or my leg sessions. I'm trying to get bigger legs, and then I need to base my runs around that. I'm trying to get faster at the 10K. I need to prioritize my running sessions and then have my lifting sessions based around that. Sometimes that's what you need to do. Sometimes you don't. If you're like me and you're just happy to progress really slow and just have general goals right now of improving your running and lifting, have a 50-50 split. That also works fine. Anyway, I've yapped on a lot. Tune in next episode. I hope you guys got something out of this. Any questions about anything I said, comment, share, do all that stuff. Subscribe if you're on YouTube. Episodes, I'm going to try to keep coming every week if I can. Nonetheless, thanks for listening. Thanks for lifting to the Lift Heavy Run Fast. Wow. Thank you for listening to the Lift Heavy Run Fast podcast with me, Hybrid Coach Mike. I'll see you guys next week.